What's going on, guys? Wanted to throw up this quick little how-to video for the Mopar accessory tailgate reinforcement and tire carrier bracket. So I will throw those part numbers down in the description, but these are the two parts that we're going to use. And first thing I like to do is disconnect the third brake light and backup camera connector so you can get that spare tire carrier completely off the vehicle, just so you aren't having to work around it dangling and hanging by the wiring. So we need to open up the tailgate and we are going to pull off this rear tailgate panel, and it's super easy. No screws, no bolts. You just grab and pull the body clips off and you are already there. And as you can see, we've got two connectors over there. We've got a camera connector and a third brake light connector. So we're going to get those two disconnected so we can pull that wiring harness back through the outside of the tailgate, so we can get that get that tire carrier off. So once we've got those disconnected, you pull the wiring grommet through. And now we're ready to take that 13mm socket on a impact or ratchet and take all of the bolts out that hold the tire carrier onto the factory tailgate. And once we get that last bolt off, we're going to set that tire carrier down out of the way, and now we can work on that tailgate since we don't have anything in the way. And I like to use some blue or green painter's tape because the next step is going to be unbolting the hinge from the tailgate, and I like to use the tape to kind of hold the tailgate alignment, because if you don't use anything, the tailgate's going to fall down. And I found that even just the painter's tape is enough to hold that tailgate and keep the adjustment, so you aren't having to worry about, it closing incorrectly and hitting the striker and causing issues. So once you get that tape all the way around, you're going to take a T50 Torx. And I like to use a hand ratchet to break everything loose because these are extremely tight. So make sure you've got that socket all the way in the bolt, because they are painted so that T50 Torx fits really, really tightly. And like I said, these bolts are outrageously tight. But once you get them all broke loose, I then take my impact and spin them the rest of the way out. But I just don't feel good about impacting on them right away since they are so outrageously tight. But like I said, once you get them all broken loose, at least a turn or so, run back with your impact and buzz those the rest of the way out. And you're gonna actually get rid of those factory nice painted bolts, because the tailgate bracket comes with new hardware that they want you to use. So that tailgate bracket, you've got the 4 bolts that go back into those hinge bolt holes, but you've got a small metal spacer that you're going to need to put behind the tailgate bracket. So it's kind of a bit of a task to kind of get everything fished together without it falling off, and you've got 4 of them to do. So I like to start one and get it threaded in just a few turns, enough where it's going to hold itself on, that spacer isn't going to fall off, and you can still get the next bolt the bolt next to it fished in with the spacer behind it. So it's a little bit of a balancing act, trying to get it in tight enough to hold itself but not too tight where you can actually still work behind it. And I like to start with the top, and then you can pivot the bottom out while the top bolts are at least started and get those spacers in place. The kit wants you to put all 4 bolts in, put all the spacers on the back of it, and then it comes with these little plastic star washers to hold the spacers on. but I've found that those really, if you have all 4 bolts, it doesn't line up very nicely, and it's almost more of a fight than it is just to kind of fish the bolts and the spacers through. So I do not use the little star washers that it comes with to hold the spacers in place. I just, like I said, put them in one at a time. I found that works better. And these bolts are a T45 Torx. So the 50 Torx was that factory bolt, and now the 45. So these 4 bolt holes you are really going to need to watch, because as you tighten that tailgate reinforcement bracket down, you really need to make sure that the threaded holes in the tailgate is perfectly lined up with the bracket, because later on we're going to need to install the tire carrier bracket, and if those holes are halfway covered up, you're going to not be able to get that on. So really make sure you get that lined up. And then I like to go back through by hand just to make sure everything is as tight as I feel that it needs to be. And I really hate impacting too aggressively with the aluminum tailgates and everything else. So like I said, go back through with hand and get it there. So we're gonna need to trim some of these plastic rear vents, the bottom corners, and then the very bottom outside clip is gonna need to come off. And we'll be able to see why we have to do this once we get that tire carrier bracket on. But like I said, it's outlined in the instructions, so this is something you're supposed to do. But so we've got 2 spacers. One, they will both go under the left side of each of the top and the bottom tire carrier brackets, because we need to space that away from the body to match the spacing that the right side of the bracket has from that tailgate reinforcement piece. So I get a bolt started on the tailgate reinforcement side, and then you can go ahead and get the spacer stacked underneath and then get the rest of the bolts in. And like I said, this Mopar piece is just kind of a nice piece. It's got a little you know, embossed Mopar M on it, and it just, the factory fit and finish is really nice compared to some of the aftermarket stuff that I've seen. So I don't know, I really like the Mopar piece here. So, and it comes with longer bolts that you're going to need to attach these tire carrier brackets onto the tailgate, since we've added some thickness versus the original bolts. And this bottom bracket, you can see why we've got to trim those plastic vents, because that bottom bracket actually covers just those bottom corners where those plastic pieces were, and that's why we've got to trim them out a little bit so it'll fit nice and flush. So once we get those bolts tight, there's a couple of other little small pieces that come in the kit. We've got these 3 plastic plugs that will go into the 3 threaded holes on that tailgate bracket, and they're for other accessories or brackets that you bolt on, but you can put these plugs in for the time being just to make it look a little bit nicer. And of course, most importantly, the Jeep Performance accessory badge, because you gotta have your badges. But it does have a really nice little recessed area for that badge to go on. So get your badge installed. Get your tape pulled off, because now that we've got our tailgate bracket on, we should be good there. And so the kit does come with 2 different lengths of tire bump stops for that tailgate. The shortest one is the original. You've got a medium length, and then that really long one that is actually kind of a foam, and you can adjust the length of that. I've found that most of the time the medium length is what you need to go with. You know, it's going to vary on your back spacing or, you know, factory wheel versus aftermarket wheel. But most of the time we found that medium sized spacer or, you know, tire bumper is the one that needs to go. So I spray a little bit of glass cleaner on them and they push right into place. And now we're ready to throw the tire carrier back onto our higher mounted tire carrier brackets. And you've got the 13mm nuts that the kit comes with. I like to get all of those started and then go ahead and tighten them down just to make sure everything's sitting flush. And the kit does also come with spacers that you can stack behind this tire carrier, in between the bracket and the tire carrier, if you need to space that out for, you know, different back spacing wheels or whatever. So my application, at least with this Jeep, I didn't need this, but just so you know, there is some spacers if you do need to move that out. But most of the time, we like to have the tire as close to the tailgate as possible. So we're going to take our wiring, tuck it back through into our tailgate, and go ahead and get that grommet seated back in the hole so we don't have any water coming in. And we're going to throw that tailgate open, and we've got our 2 connectors we need to hook back up for the backup camera and third brake light. And then we'll be able to put our tailgate interior trim panel on. And like I said, no fasteners, no screws or anything with just the stock panel. You've got the body clips that you're going to need to get lined up. And once you get those in place, you're going to just knock them into place because they're just a clicked together clip. So once everything's where it needs to be, we're done there. So throw your tire up on your newly installed tire carrier, and you're going to need to take a look and see if your tire is touching that rubber bumper. And in my case, this aftermarket wheel had enough back spacing. If we take a look, you can see I am nowhere close to touching that. So you want the tire touching that bump or that rubber bumper so you don't have as much load on just that tire carrier. So we're going to throw the tire back down, and those come off as easily as they go on. And we're going to go ahead and throw the longest ones that come in the kit. These ones are actually a real pain to install. They're a threaded end, kind of a rubber threaded end, and you just got to push as hard as you can while turning them in. And sometimes they will go flush and sometimes they won't sit flush. They're just really, really tough to install. So try your best, push in while turning as hard as you can. That's kind of the best thing that I've found to get them to go in as far as possible. So once you get those in, you're going to throw that tire back up and check your clearance. If that tire is too far out, you can tear or cut the ends of those segmented foam tire bumpers off to change it to make it shorter. But in this case, once we get these lug nuts tightened up, we'll take a look, and it's actually perfect with the full length, since these have a decent amount of back spacing on these wheels. So we'll snug up the lug nuts so we can check to see that we have the right length. So now when we go and look in between the tailgate and the tire, we can see that we've got a nice amount of support on that tire, so we won't have any rattles or any issues in the future. So guys, hopefully if you are in the market for a tire carrier, looking at the Mopar one, looking at aftermarket, this will at least be a good kind of run through how-to video on some of the tips and tricks, at least that I've found installing these, and will help you make a better decision on what tire carrier and or tailgate reinforcement you want to install. So Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.